President Zelensky has cast doubt on efforts to reach a peace deal with Russia, accusing President Putin of rebuffing calls for even a ceasefire. The Ukrainian president said the Russian leader had complicated the situation by failing to agree during Friday's summit in Alaska to stop the killing. President Zelensky says he now favors moving straight. President Trump, says he favors moving straight to a peace treaty rather than a temporary truce. Ukraine's European leaders will hold video talks on Sunday before President Zelensky heads to Washington for talks with Donald Trump on Monday. On Friday, President Zelensky visited the British Prime Minister in London, and the pair greeted each other in a warm embrace before holding talks over breakfast. It was seen as a carefully coordinated show of support from the UK ahead of the Trump-Putin summit in Alaska. Our correspondent in Kiev, Katie Watson, explained how President Zelensky viewed the outcome of the summit in Alaska.
He had the conversation with Donald Trump after the summit, and a call that lasted over an hour, and then he was joined by European leaders. He's welcomed the support, but he's also made Ukraine's position very clear that Ukraine needs to be a part of these conversations. Nothing can be decided without Ukraine there. That also there needs to be a trilateral meeting, but Russia, the US and Ukraine need to sit down together to talk, and he's also reiterated the need for both Europe and the US to guarantee security issues. So these are things that he's really not budging on, that are very important for Ukraine. And of course, going to Washington on Monday, once again, those issues will be at the heart of what President Zelensky will be talking about with Donald Trump.
Differences there, but also differences emerging on what to do next in the conflict. President Trump saying a peace deal should be agreed. President Zelensky saying it should be a ceasefire agreed first. What does this mean for the talks on Monday?
Yeah, it's a red line for Zelensky. He's always said that there needs to be a ceasefire before any lasting peace deals. He said again that this, Russia not wanting a ceasefire is making things complicated. And now we've heard Trump wanting to skip the ceasefire and move to a lasting peace deal. So I think he's going to be going to Washington on the back foot, if you like. He's going to be speaking to Trump after Trump's had a summit with President Putin. And what's he going to have a conversation about? Will it be an open conversation about what's best for Ukraine, or will it be some kind of deal that Putin and Trump want to put to Zelensky? Of course, Putin won't be there, but whether it's something that he will feel pressured to try and accept, or whether he will be seen as the deal maker or the deal breaker. I mean, I think it's going to be a very difficult conversation when all three countries are not sitting at the table together to be able to discuss this.
And Katie, negotiating a peace deal right now likely means Ukraine giving up some of its territory. What do Ukrainians make of that?
Again, Zelensky has made it very clear that that's not something that he'd want to be a party to, giving up territory. And this reported discussion of giving up the Donbass in return for freezing other parts of the front line would also mean having to give up some of the cities that Ukraine has held on to in the Donbass, and he's been very clear about that not happening. I mean, speaking to Ukrainians yesterday about how they feel that Zelensky has been put in a difficult situation with this Putin-Trump summit in Alaska, that he's been working hard to try and fix it. I think people here are frustrated. They have almost given up on any kind of deal coming through quickly in this talk of peace. It's a conversation that is, a constant conversation, but when exactly peace will come, these are difficult conversations that we're seeing play out with these global leaders, everyone who wants to contribute with a different kind of perspective that Zelensky is now going to have to answer to when he goes to Washington.
The BBC's Katie Watson in Kiev there. Well, Daniel Lippman is the White House and Washington reporter at Politico. He told me how the summit has been received among President Trump's supporters.
Trump has been able to get his supporters to come along on basically anything he wants. And so when he was more in favor of Russia's position a few months ago, then his supporters had no problem with that. And they have led to him to support him when he was more pro-Zelensky more recently. And so I think Americans are kind of paying attention to this, and they don't want Ukraine to be a 10-year war. But they also don't want Putin to win. So they want a fair peace to be negotiated. But they also know that Putin is a stone-cold killer. He is not popular in America because traditionally the Republican Party was a very strong anti-Russian party.
And focus now turns to President Zelensky's visit to the White House on Monday, 6 months after the previous disastrous visit to the Oval Office. What's expected this time around?
So I think what Zelensky is going to be telling Trump is do not believe Putin when he says he is ready for peace or that he wants a negotiated solution, that we have to keep the pressure on. We have to keep U.S. and European support to Ukraine to push back against Russian territorial advances. And when Putin says, we would not have a war if Trump was in office in 2022, that he is not telling the truth, that in fact, Putin has only doubled his drone attacks since Trump came into office. And so that is a complete sign of disrespect to Trump. And so I think the message is going to try to be the last person in Trump's ear to persuade him that Putin is not a person who is pursuing peace, as the slogan said in the back of their Alaska speeches.
President Trump has now called for a peace deal rather than a ceasefire to be agreed initially, something that President Zelensky and most European leaders will be opposed to. How could this affect what President Trump does next?
So Trump had said he would be very unhappy if Putin did not agree to at least a brief ceasefire in the Alaska summit, but he has kind of totally forgotten that message in more recent days. And so he has, over the years, cultivated this relationship with Putin that has become very strange, because you don't see this traditionally with an American president. And so Trump admires how strong Putin is. And so I think what Zelensky will have to do is play up to Trump's ego and say, hey, you can get this Nobel Peace Prize, but we need a fair peace. We can't just have Putin rearm in the next few years. And so those security guarantees are important. Trump has not been really willing to do that until now, at least publicly. And so we may just see a stalemate, because what Putin doesn't want is a trilateral meeting between Zelensky, Putin, and Trump very quickly. He wants to leave that to the end stage of negotiations. And that is not something that that Trump or Zelensky want right now. They want to meet right now, and Putin seems to be the obstacle there.